Good afternoon. I'm Teresa Stretch, an Education and Training Specialist with the Institute of Child Nutrition, and I would like to welcome you today to the September School Nutrition S.T.A.R webinar on food safety in schools. In order to meet the unique training, technical assistance, and professional development needs of school and nutrition professions, ICN launched the School Nutrition S.T.A.R Strategies, Trainings, Action Plans, and Resources initiative to help schools develop goals and best practices to improve program administration and operations. The School Nutrition S.T.A.R program will offer a multitude of elements that include face-to-face workshops, virtual instructor-led training, webinars, and spotlight success stories to proactively offer standardized training, real-life strategies of program, implementation, mentorship and coaching to develop action plans and goals along with training and facilitation techniques, and access to free resources and educational materials to assist school and nutrition professionals with navigating through the enhanced responsibilities of the school and nutrition operations. The Institute of Child Nutrition has collaborated with USDA to host monthly webinars. The S.T.A.R webinar series is designed as a communication platform that features school districts that have implemented creative strategies and best practices for common school and nutrition topics, as well as allied organizations who develop and offer free resources to support school and nutrition programs. The Institute has created a website for all materials and resources specifically related to the webinars. You can find the information at theicn.org/STAR. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Food Safety in Schools. The webinar will provide an overview of good practices for food safety and norovirus. It will discuss the actions needed to build and maintain a food safety culture within the school and nutrition program. During today's webinar, all attendees are muted. There will be time for questions following the speaker's presentation. If you have a question, please type it into the question box on your screen. Handouts are available and can be downloaded directly from your webinar panel. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, but due to our time constraints, every question may not get answered during the webinar. At the end of the presentation, you will be asked to complete an evaluation, and after completion of the evaluation, you will receive a certificate. The topics covered in today's webinar fall under the Key Area 2, Operations, and meet the USDA Professional Standard Codes Food Safety Culture 2640. Our panelists for today are Liz Dixon. Liz has a Master in Food and Nutrition and Culinary Sciences from Clemson University and a Bachelor's in Nutrition and Food Science from Auburn University. She is certified in Design Learning and Writing for Instructional Design and Training from ATD Education. She is also an ACE Certified Health Coach and Personal Trainer, AFAA Certified Group Fitness Instructor, and Certified Zumba Instructor. She has 14 years of experience in the food and health industry. She enjoys teaching her fitness classes and hiking with her dog. Liz is very instrumental in the development of the food safety resources. Tina Haynes is a food safety specialist for USDA Food and Nutrition Service Office of Food Safety, providing food safety support and resources for school and nutrition professionals. She is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and a registered nurse. Tina worked as a dietitian and nurse in clinical hospital long-term care centers settings for over 20 years prior to joining the food safety team at USDA. Tina began her government career with USDA Food Safety Inspection Service as a food safety specialist for USDA's Meat and Poultry Hotline, also known as the Turkey, Poultry, and Turkey Hotline. She was also part of USDA Virtual Representatives Ask Karen, providing food safety education and support to consumer and industry members, food safety questions and issues. Jessica Terranova A registered and licensed dietitian, Jessica oversees all school meals service for Red Clay, approximately 2 million lunches and 960,000 breakfasts per year. Jessica joined Red Clay as a dietitian in 2008 and became manager of nutrition services 5 years later. With her expertise in food and nutrition, Jessica brings innovative ideas and recipes to the School Meals program to encourage healthy eating by taking popular foods and adding a fun, healthy twist. She also strives to enhance the overall experience students have when they go through the meal service line, focusing on outstanding presentation and customer service. Under Jessica's leadership, the district has implemented grab-and-go breakfast programs in all schools and even started offering after-school dinner programs. Herself a product of Red Clay School, Jessica values her position in the nutrition department as it gives her an opportunity to contribute to the education experience by working to improve the health and eating patterns of Red Clay student body, one meal at a time. Jessica holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Nutrition and Dietetics from the University of Delaware. The learning objective for today's webinar: participants will identify strategies to promote a culture of food safety behaviors in the school community. Liz will begin by sharing some food safety key concepts that can contribute to the journey of implementing your food safety culture.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Liz. I'm really excited to be here with you this afternoon. What I'm going to go through with my presentation is just some food safety basics. It's going to be a very kind of quick overview of food safety. If you would like to take a deeper dive at any time, we have a ton of valuable resources on our website. I know many of y'all have gone through food safety trainings and food safety certifications, but today I wanted to, as we go over food safety basics, cover some stories and general questions I have been asked in the 5 years I've been at the Institute. I will say the main thing I have learned in my job is that food safety is not common sense. And so it's really important to always brush up. I like to think of food safety in, some people find food safety very overwhelming. Some people find it very easy. I like to kind of break it into different parts. So today we're going to talk about the people who make the food, the environment the food is made in, and then also the food itself. So starting with the people who make the food, it is very, very important. The most important thing of today, well, not most important, but very important indeed, is to come to school dressed properly and ready to work with the food. Many schools may have uniforms, but it's very important to remember the basics. You want that hair restrained. You want to make sure the clothes and apron you're wearing are clean. Nails are short, no polish or false nails. Although it's more worker safety, wearing those long pants, those no-slip shoes, and making sure that you do not work when you're sick, don't touch ready-to-eat foods with bare hands, and make sure you wash your hands, which we're going to cover in more detail. So it is very important to make sure that food safety's kind of main goal is to prevent foodborne illness. Nobody wants a foodborne illness outbreak in their schools. So it's very important to make sure that you report these symptoms to your manager or director. That include vomiting, diarrhea, sore throat with fever, jaundice, which is yellowing of the skin or eyes, wounds on the hands or arms, diagnosis of foodborne illness, or exposure to a foodborne illness. Your manager or director will determine whether you need to go home or whether or not you just need to not work around food. And I know that not having pay on a sick day might not be fun, but shutting down an entire school is worse. So we are going to watch a quick video. We are very excited about some of the new technology we have here at the Institute. So afterward, we're going to have a quick poll, but we will go ahead and show this quick little hand washing video first. All right, moving forward, thank you for the feedback that we got. So just quickly going over the hand washing steps we just saw. You want to make sure you got that warm running water. You have that soap on your hands while you're answering the poll question. You have that soap on your hands, your forearms, scrubbing in between those fingers, under those cuticles, under those nails, up the forearms, around the wrists, washing it off, and then making sure you dry those hands with a single-use paper towel, and then using that towel to turn off the sink. One of the things I have seen, and actually what one of my coworkers mentioned to me, is that they had never thought about turning the sink off with the towel before. It just never occurred to them, and then they realized how contaminated your hands can get from actually retouching the sink you just did. So very important to make sure not only do you wash your hands, but you wash your hands at the proper times as well, definitely in between tasks, when putting on gloves. There's a wide variety of areas. We have a ton of more research, resources available at the Institute, so you're always welcome to go to our website for more information. Another thing that's very important is to prevent bare hand contact with ready-to-eat foods. What ready-to-eat foods are foods that are no longer going to be cooked or have any further washing steps. They're literally ready to eat, as the name says. To make sure you prevent bare hand contact with ready-to-eat foods, you can use a variety of utensils: tongs, spoons, ladles, scoops, spoodles, deli packaging. You can package them in for individual service, and you can use single-use gloves. Probably one of the biggest food safety issues I have seen, though, is using single-use gloves. There's a common misconception that a common mental misconception that people have that the gloves are to protect them. That is the medical field. In the medical field, gloves protect you from the other person. In the food service industry, gloves protect the food from you. So being really diligent about making sure that those gloves, you're keeping them clean. If they get dirty, to take them off, wash your hands, and put on new gloves, because unfortunately they are not magic and they do get kind of nasty and you have to change them out. So moving on to that environment, in general, just overview, keep it clean. Wash, rinse, sanitize, and air dry before and after every use. You got to get those food contact surfaces, that equipment, utensils, the sinks, the tables, that's both cafeteria tables and the food prep tables, the thermometers, the carts. If it's going to come in contact with food, wash, rinse, sanitize, and air dry beforehand. And I know that may seem like a lot, but I heard a story before of a child having an allergic reaction from peanut butter that was used to make bird feeders the night before, and he came in contact with it on the table. So very, very important. Make sure you're cleaning properly, washing, rinsing, sanitizing, air drying, all those surfaces before and after use. So when washing dishes, obviously you got your 3-compartment sink, wash, rinse, sanitize over again, or you have your dish machine. You want to make sure with these that if you're using temperature as a sanitizer, that you're checking that temperature with the appropriate thermometer. If you're using sanitizing, like a sanitizing solution, that is at the correct sanitizing recommendation that the manufacturer has, because if it is too strong, you risk having it leave a chemical residue on the equipment. If it is too weak, you risk it not doing its job. So really important to use those test strips. Another thing that I saw that I wanted to bring up is you want to make sure that you don't load the dirty dishes and then turn around and pick up and put away the clean dishes without washing your hands in between, because just like that sink faucet, you've now contaminated those dishes. So moving on to kind of food in general areas. So you have your receiving area. This is where you're going to get your food in. You want to make sure that when you get your food's at 41 degrees or below. For your refrigerated food, your frozen food's at 32 degrees or below. You want to use that invoice, inspect to make sure the food you're getting matches the food that you're receiving on your invoice. Inspect for damage, inspect for signs of thawing, make sure you check those temperatures, make sure you check that truck, make sure that truck is nice and clean. And one of the easiest ways to give yourself time to do this is make sure you schedule time for deliveries. Try to schedule it away from service hours. So definitely staying away from that lunch hour. And when you do receive that food, trying to put it away in the order of put it in the refrigerator, put it in the freezer, and then put the dry goods away. So that helps with that temperature control and make sure that we can try to keep that food safe. I just want to mention a lot of the graphics that you're going to see throughout this presentation are on our brand new food safety posters. So if you like them, you can go find the poster for them. So moving on to cold storage. This is our refrigerator and freezer. You want the refrigerator at 41 degrees or below, and you want the freezer at 0 degrees or below. And you want to make sure that you're always checking the temperatures on the refrigerators and freezers and making sure you're logging them. I heard one story from a school nutrition director. The freezer went down. They went to the log to see how long the food had been, the freezer may have been out, hoping to possibly save the food. And the log was empty for the week before, and all the food had to be thrown out. And so that's a lot of wasted inventory, a lot of wasted money, and could have possibly been saved if they had known how long the food had been, the fridge had been down. Another thing you want with your cold storage, you want to make sure you're storing that food in a way that they're not going to cross-contaminate each other, putting that ready-to-eat food that's not going to be cooked on top, and then going down each shelf, starting from the lowest cooking temperature all the way to the highest at the bottom, making sure that you keep that food safe. Moving on to dry storage, just a couple things to remember. Very important to label and date that food. You want to know when it came in, and you want to know what it is. With that, make sure you use that first in, first out FIFO. So using that oldest inventory first. One, it helps so you don't waste food, and then also helps that food gets, you're not wasting inventory or wasting money. You want to keep the storage area clean, items at least 6 inches off the floor, and very important, keep those chemicals in a separate room away from the food. I think one of the scariest things I ever saw was cockroaches in a cardboard box. So you definitely keep that area clean, move that cardboard out of there, get those shelves stacked. So coming to the preparation area, you want to make sure to control temperature during preparation. So especially for that cold food, holding it at 41 degrees or below. Some ways you can do this, prepare those cold foods in small batches. You can pre-chill those shelf-stable food prior to preparation, such as like if you had a fruit cocktail in a can, you could pre-chill it so it'd be nice and cold, following those standardized recipes. Also, in preparation, making sure you don't have any cross-contamination or cross-contact. You can do that with either using color-coded cutting boards. Another possibility is to make sure you wash, rinse, sanitize, and air dry the cutting boards in between any kind of allergen, raw meat, raw vegetables, or different kinds of meat. So one thing that's really important is to think about the types of contamination you are trying to avoid in your food production kitchen. There are 3 types of contamination. You have cross-contamination, chemical contamination, and cross-contact. Now, cross-contamination, that's the transfer of bacteria or viruses from hands, foods, or equipment to food. It can be done 3 different ways. You can have your hands to food, like touching a trash can lid and then not washing your hands before preparing food. Food to food, which is like thawing raw meat above fresh produce and the raw meat drips on the produce. And then equipment or food contact surfaces to food, which is like using the can opener on a bunch of different foods without cleaning in between. You also have chemical contamination, which is the accidental transfer, or accidentally when chemicals get accidentally in food. An example of this is if you were to spray sanitizer next to an uncovered pot of food, you risk the aerolized chemical possibly getting in the food. The last one you may or may not be familiar with is called cross-contact. This is the accidental transfer of an allergen into an allergen-free food. For example, if I use a knife and I'm making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and then I just wipe it off on a towel, then use that same knife to start cutting turkey sandwiches in half without cleaning, I've now gotten peanut residue on those turkey sandwiches, and so cross-contact has occurred. So with cooking, it's very important that you get those you reach those internal cooking temperatures, as you can see listed here. Those internal cooking temperatures, they are associated with the bacteria most commonly found in those foods. So when you want to get to that cooking temperature to make sure that those bacteria have been eliminated. The best way to ensure that you've reached these internal temperatures is to use a calibrated thermometer. And it's very important that it's calibrated. Otherwise, it could possibly be reading incorrectly. Ideally, you want to calibrate on a daily basis, but at least weekly, or if it was dropped or exposed to extreme temperatures. And you can use both digital and dial thermometers. So in your serving area, we're going to follow this good personal hygiene practices. Hold the food at the correct temperatures, 135 for those hot food or above for those hot foods, 41 degrees or below for those cold foods. We're going to make sure the food is covered in between the serving periods, that if there's any spills, we're going to clean on the serving line. But one thing that is also very important to think about is avoiding allergens while you're serving. There's a story of a girl in Canada who unfortunately was exposed to an allergen that she had because of tongs being used on 2 separate types of food, and unfortunately she had an allergic reaction. So also thinking about ensuring that no cross contact occurs in that serving area. So for cooling, some people, their health departments do not allow them to cool. But in case they do, you want to make sure you're following those cooling recommendations. You want to go from 135 to 70 within the first 2 hours. Once you hit that 70 within 2 hours mark, getting it from 70 to 41 within the following 4 hours. You can do this through a variety of cooling methods. One of them featured here is the ice bath. You want to take that food, put it in shallow trays, fill your other larger tray with 1-to-1 ice to water, putting that food into that ice bath, making sure that the water doesn't seep into the food, stirring it when you can, checking that temperatures, monitoring it, make sure it gets down to those correct temperatures and hits those temperature recommendations. And finally, we have reheating. You want to make sure if you're reheating food, such as leftovers, that you get it to 165 and holds that 165 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 50 seconds, and you want to get it to that temperature within 2 hours of removing it from the refrigerator. A question I get a lot is how many times can I reheat food? In theory, if you follow all proper cooling procedures and all proper reheating procedures and all proper cooking procedures, you could reheat it multiple times, but you run the risk if you're unable to ensure those proper temperature, time and temperature procedures, of possible bacteria contamination, and also your quality will definitely decrease the more times you reheat food, and nobody likes serving mush. And this is probably one of the most important slides here, documenting. You need school-specific standard operating procedures. Your staff needs to know them. They need to be trained on them. They need to know where they are, and they need to be using logs. They need to make, if they're doing a food safety action, it needs to be recorded. Those refrigerator logs, those cooking logs, those serving, hot holding logs. We have several available on the ICN website. But I actually heard a story about a school who there was a foodborne illness outbreak. They went to go check their records, and sure enough, the day the outbreak occurred, no cooking temperatures were written down. So I have thank you so much for letting me speak with you all today. I do have one question. Is it necessary to have the sanitizing compartment at 171 degrees Fahrenheit? Can high tips degrade a chemical such as chlorine or cause hand burns? So with your sanitizing compartment, you want to either to use a hot water sanitizer at 171 or a chemical sanitizer, not both at the same time. If you're going to use a chemical sanitizer, use the recommended temperatures that the manufacturer has. And definitely make sure you read those, read what the manufacturer is making available. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the presentation over to Tina. She's going to go into a little bit more detail about norovirus. I'm very excited to give it to her today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Liz. Happy to be here, and I'm glad that everyone is able to log in and register and attend today's presentation. I'm Tina Haynes, and I am with the Office of Food Safety, which is part of USDA, Food and Nutrition Service. So let me just get set up here. Okay. Okay. All right, here we go. So one of the things that the objective for today is to provide an overview of norovirus, the symptoms, how it spreads, and why it's important for school nutrition employees to know about norovirus. I could do an hour presentation or longer on norovirus, but I just want to go over the basics today. But first, I'd like to ask everyone a question about norovirus to see what you know. I'm going to wait for the poll to open. Okay, so the question is, norovirus can be spread by contaminated food and water, direct contact with an ill person, airborne particles, contaminated surfaces, or all of the above. And I'm going to give everyone a few seconds to respond. Okay, so we're just waiting for the results. Norovirus is also known as the notorious norovirus because it spreads so quickly. So let's see if everyone knows how it spreads. Okay. Okay, so we're going to give it a few more seconds. Okay, here we go. Oh my goodness, you're all smart. You all know that it's all of the above, that all of those ways, it's transmitted by many different ways. It's through contaminated food and water. So if you got the answer, E, all the above, you're correct. Let me back up a little bit. Okay, so this is what norovirus looks like under an electron microscope. It's small and round in structure, and it doesn't take very many particles of the norovirus to infect someone. It's often referred to as the stomach bug, but it's also known as the winter vomiting disease. And that's because it's more commonly spread in the winter months, from April to about November, from November to about April. Sorry, I got that backwards. The symptoms are nausea, vomiting, stomach cramps, and diarrhea. And hold on a second. Just a minute here. Having some technical difficulties. Okay. And you can get norovirus illness many times in your life because there are many different types of norovirus. Infection with one type of norovirus may not protect you against other types. It's possible to develop immunity or protection against specific types, but it's not known exactly how long immunity lasts. So this may explain why so many people of all ages get infected during norovirus outbreaks. Also, whether you are susceptible to a norovirus infection is thought to be also determined in part by your genes. The symptoms. Symptoms of norovirus are nausea, vomiting, stomach cramps, and diarrhea. Norovirus strikes fast, causing inflammation of the stomach intestines. So it's, no other way to say it's coming out of both ends. People usually feel sick suddenly and with no warning. They may have nausea, sudden explosive or projectile vomiting, diarrhea, and stomach cramps. Some people might also experience fever, headache, or body aches, and the symptoms can appear from 12 to 48 hours after being exposed to the virus. Most people with norovirus illness get better within 1 to 3 days. If you have norovirus illness, you can feel extremely ill and vomit or have diarrhea many times a day. So this is not pleasant to have. This can lead to dehydration, especially in young children, older adults, and people with other illnesses. But most healthy people do recover without medical intervention. So schools, let me back up a little bit. Transmission, how is it spread? Well, it spreads very easily. You can get norovirus by accidentally getting tiny particles of stool or vomit from an infected person in your mouth. I know that sounds kind of gross, but if you think about it, this can happen if you eat food or drink liquids that are contaminated with norovirus, touch surfaces or objects contaminated with norovirus, and because you can't see the particles. Then put your fingers in your mouth, or if you have direct contact with someone who is infected with norovirus, such as if you're caring for a child who's sick, or you share eating utensils with them. If you get norovirus illness, you can shed billions of norovirus particles that you cannot see without a microscope. And it only takes a few norovirus particles to make a person sick. So when someone vomits, tiny particles can spread widely and land on surfaces at least 25 feet away. So think about that. How far is 25 feet? That's a long way. So if a child were to vomit, a child that had norovirus were to vomit in a hallway in a school, think about how far that spreads. And if the surfaces aren't cleaned properly afterwards, or if there are other children in the environment, then they could be exposed to this virus. Okay, and then they'll become sick. And you are most contagious when you have symptoms of norovirus illness, especially vomiting and during the first days after you recover from norovirus illness. However, studies have shown that you can still spread norovirus for 2 weeks or more after you feel better. Why are schools? Why do you need to know about this if you are a school nutrition professional? Because schools are kind of like a perfect storm. There are many people in a close setting, such as a school, and so illness can spread quickly. Lots of people in confined spaces. Think about, we've heard on the news about the cruise ships, because all these people are in a confined space. It spreads quickly. The other thing is an outbreak, if it occurs, is not only do people get sick, but it can be costly to the school. The amount of work and money that's involved in cleanup, depending on where an outbreak happens. All the classrooms may need to be cleaned. The buses may need to be cleaned. Parents have to stay home from work if their children are sick or if they get it. Teachers may get sick, and so there's a decrease in productivity. So it does have an economic impact on a school and can possibly close a school for a day or two. Norovirus survives at least a week on surfaces. And busy little hands in schools from children touch everything. I went to a nursing seminar this summer and was told by an environmental specialist that kids touch their faces, their eyes, their mouth 5+ times a minute. I know I thought maybe an hour, but a minute. So think about that. If a surface is contaminated with norovirus, they could be contaminating their cells if they touch something. Hand washing is important and a key component of prevention, but it only addresses part of the problem. You have to make sure that the hand washing is thorough. Remember the video that Liz just showed, the 20-second rule, or sing the happy birthday song twice. And it's most important to avoid recontamination. Turning off the faucet handle with a paper towel. If you can, open the door with a paper towel so that you do not recontaminate your hands. I just wanted to show you this infographic really quick. The Office of Food Safety put this together. Norovirus is the leading cause of illness and outbreaks from contaminated food in the U.S. Most of these outbreaks occur in food service settings like a restaurant. Infected workers are frequently the source of outbreaks, often by touching ready-to-eat foods such as raw fruits and vegetables with their bare hands before serving them. However, any food served raw or handled after being cooked can become contaminated with norovirus. It can be a burden on a school if an outbreak happens, like I said before. But schools, I just want you to know, schools are doing a great job of ensuring that kids are served safe meals. But outbreaks do occur. Less than 4% of all foodborne outbreaks reported to the CDC, or the Centers for Disease Control, are associated with schools. But when they do occur, illnesses are most often associated with norovirus. Okay, let's see. Next slide. Prevention. These key practices can help prevent the spread of norovirus by food handlers. Liz has already gone over some of these, but it's always good to refresh yourself. Practicing good personal hygiene, which includes staying home when sick and reporting an illness to your supervisor, if an employee is sick, they should report the illness to their supervisor. Frequent hand washing with soap and water, especially after each toilet visit, before eating or preparing food, before putting on clean gloves, and after changing diapers in childcare settings. Avoid touching food with your bare hands with all ready-to-eat and ready-to-serve foods. Wear gloves or utensils, which is what I think Liz went over a little bit ago. Again, I just want to repeat again, when food service workers I want to repeat again that food service workers should not work when sick. Workers should report symptoms of illness to their supervisor. Vomiting, diarrhea, current or recent foodborne illness, recent exposure to someone with a foodborne illness. Hand washing. I'm going to repeat this over and over again. This is the #1 way to reduce foodborne illness in your operation. Hand washing is important, but again, effective hand washing is even more important. Follow proper hand washing procedure. Again, the 20-second rule. Avoid recontamination after washing your hands. There are lots of germy surfaces in schools. Remember, there's door handles, there's the kids' desks. Proper cleaning of these surfaces is important. So again, wash your hands thoroughly with soap and water, especially after using the toilet or changing diapers, always before eating, preparing, or handling food. And norovirus can be found in your vomit or stool even before you start feeling sick. The virus can stay in your stool for 2 weeks or more after you feel better. The virus can stay in your stool for 2 weeks or more after you feel better. It's important to continue washing your hands often during this time. You can use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer in addition to hand washing, but you should not use hand sanitizer as a substitute for washing your hands with soap and water. Hand sanitizers aren't as effective as washing hands with soap and water at removing norovirus particles. So soap and water is the best. If you can use the sanitizers if you don't have anything else. How contagious is norovirus? I just want to repeat, just a very small amount. As few as 18 viral particles of norovirus on your food or your hands can make you sick. In fact, the amount of virus particles that would fit on the head of a pin would be enough to infect more than 1,000 people. And that's why it's called the notorious norovirus. It spreads fast and it spreads quickly, and it doesn't require a lot of the virus particles to make someone sick. So, what should you do if an outbreak occurs? Well, you should prepare beforehand. You should know how to respond to a norovirus outbreak before one happens in order to contain it. Again, norovirus is a leading cause of foodborne disease in the U.S. and has been the primary source of outbreaks in schools. Follow prevention steps to reduce the likelihood of an outbreak in your school. Be prepared by knowing the signs and symptoms of norovirus to prevent the spread. Remember, it spreads quickly. Knowing how to clean up, should an employee vomit in the kitchen, is important. And it's a team effort because it's not always the kitchen where this starts. It can start in the school. A child can bring it into the school, and it's not foodborne related. So it's a team effort to clean this up. You should work with your school nurse, the administration, so that everyone knows what to do should someone with norovirus get sick in the school. And actually, most norovirus incidents do occur outside of the kitchen. So being prepared before an event, such as an employee vomiting in a kitchen, is essential to controlling an outbreak. You have to stop, if someone does vomit in the kitchen, for example, you have to stop all operations. You remove individuals who are within 25 feet, and they should wash their hands and possibly remove any clothing that was contaminated, such as an apron. And you would also have to dispose of any foods that were within a 25 feet radius of the person vomiting. Have a body fluid cleanup kit ready. And I'm not going to dive into the details of a cleanup kit because that could be another webinar. There are resources with this information that I'll mention at the close of this session that are free and can provide you more details if needed. But it is important to clean the affected area with the appropriate type of disinfectant. And finally, I just wanted to share this resource with you that the Office of Food Safety has on our website. It's called the Stomach Bug Book, and it has all the information that I just talked about, the signs and symptoms, and what you need to do to clean up, including what disinfectant to use, such as bleach, the bleach concentrations. And so that is the end of my presentation, and now if there's any questions. Okay, I have one question, and I want to check the time just to make sure I could probably answer one or two. Which disinfectant is most effective for norovirus cleanup? I don't have specific data on which is the most effective, but I know that you can use bleach, and it has to be used in a certain concentration. And we have, and I don't remember the exact concentration off the top of my head, but we do have that information available in the stomach bug book. So I'm getting, so it's 1,000 to 5,000 parts per million. Let me see here. It is in the stomach bug book. You can find that information there. And also, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA.gov, has a list of approved disinfectants to kill norovirus, and I think it kills a lot of other things too. And if you go to EPA, Environmental Protection Association.gov, and type in norovirus in their search box, and I just went there this morning to check it, it will provide you with a list of approved disinfectants that will kill norovirus. Okay, and we can have time for one more question. Where can I get the posters? I have 3 kitchens, and I need them. Okay, you can contact ICN. When you sign up for the webinar, you have their web address. You can contact ICN for those posters, and they'll be happy to provide them for you. And I think that's all that I have time for. Thank you for your attention. And now I'm going to turn this presentation over to Jessica.
Hello, everyone. Jessica Terranova here. Thank you very much, Tina. I appreciate that. During my presentation, I'm really going to be focusing a lot on the practicality of monitoring food safety in the schools through training, use of various types of equipment, so how you really tackle food safety. As they were talking about it earlier, there's a lot that goes into training on food safety, and a lot of people think sometimes it's common sense, and as Liz mentioned earlier, there's a lot that is not common sense and requires a lot of monitoring at various levels. So I'm going to breeze through some of these slides pretty quickly. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly just go over a little bit about my district, just so you kind of understand as I'm talking about the tools that we use. Some of them may apply to larger districts, and some of them may not be as practical for larger districts. So I just wanted to give you an idea of kind of our district dynamics. So we're 25 schools, and we also picked up 2 additional schools this additional year. So we have a total of 27 sites that we provide meal service to each year. A lot of which 18 of the 25 in Red Clay operate as CEP schools, so they all get free meals. And we have an enrollment of almost 18,000 with the 2 additional schools. We're around 18,500 students that come into our buildings every day. And every single site serves breakfast and lunch. And as mentioned earlier, we also picked up dinner and snack programs as well after school. Our participation for breakfast is around a little over 6,000 breakfasts a day, and that's just reimbursable. And then same for lunches, around 11,000. Total after-school meals and dinners served last year was 92,787. So as you can see, there's a lot of meals served, which means there's a lot of chance for food safety incidents to happen. So it's important that we have various parameters in place. Another quick recap of my department so you can understand how we are managed. We have myself as a manager. We have an operations and nutrition specialist, another nutrition specialist, financial, secretary, the clerk, and we have a lot of on-site supervision, which I think is very important because there's a lot of times when things happen in the field that you can't control from the office. So we have field operation managers that oversee several sites, and they're crucial as far as ongoing monitoring in the schools. A production manager, which I'll elaborate on a little bit more, he's primarily responsible for recipe development and overseeing recipe testing, checking cooling procedures as we add them to recipes. And then all the schools have site-level managers that are responsible for seeing the day-to-day management. We have meal handlers that take food from site to site. And then within our schools, we have about 195 cafeteria staff and substitute workers as well. Just a quick couple photos. All the photos you'll see throughout the presentation are various photos from our program that we are proud to display. So how does Red Clay address food safety in the school cafeterias? Through the use of our HACCP manual, basic sanitation and cleanliness procedures, various employee training programs, recipe process and instructions, equipment, and ongoing monitoring. So we're just going to take a closer look at each one of those. So the HACCP committee included managers, specialists, myself as a manager, cooks, lead workers, general workers. We really wanted to make sure we had a diverse HACCP committee because we want to make sure what we were implementing was practical in the field and not just something we were thinking would be a good idea at the office. We want to make sure the practicality is there. In the beginning, first few years, we met regularly to evaluate the manual and ensure compliance, made modifications to our operating procedures as needed, and we review our manual annually to ensure that we're updating our department policies and procedures as we change our overall practices to make sure that our food is served safely. This HACCP 7 principles, I'm not going to go into too much detail there, but our HACCP manual addresses each of the 7 HACCP principles, and they're all listed there. So we always are emphasizing these HACCP principles, and you'll see them later in the presentation throughout our recipes and our HACCP manual. They're detailed in there thoroughly. So we have a basic sanitation and cleanliness procedures. We have a service contract with a food safety and sanitation company that really does a lot of ongoing training, which is crucial in a district of our size. Cleaning and sanitation chemicals are provided with that contract, and they also provide an extensive audit monthly, and they review the compliance with the proper use of chemicals. They review staff compliance with the HACCP procedures, and they pretty much do a monthly pre-Board of Health visit. So they're looking at making sure that we're compliant with everything that the Board of Health would address when they come out, which is great because it keeps the staff regularly aware of their processes and food safety practices to make sure that they are kept up to date. And this is in addition to the monitoring that's done daily by our cafeteria managers and field operation managers. Our cleaning and sanitation procedures are outlined in our manual, and they're also outlined in the materials provided by the company who we contract with. Employee training programs. As Liz mentioned earlier, it is something that needs ongoing training. New hire training is offered for all employees. And then managers, if they feel that their kitchen could use some refreshing, they can reach out to that contract company, or they can go ahead and provide the training themselves if it's something they feel they're comfortable with addressing. But I do think that food safety is something you constantly need to be retraining staff on and reemphasizing the importance of it. Monthly training is provided to all staff on various food safety topics, and we'll go into more detail about that. And ServSafe certification is required for all of our managers, leads, and cooks. But on top of that, we do offer various opportunities for ServSafe certification for all staff, and I encourage that they take advantage of those trainings as often as possible. And all employees not ServSafe certified are required to take and pass a basic food safety course, and that is a 4-hour course, including the length of time it takes to do the test, that they all have to take and pass if they're not ServSafe certified. And we also do some scenario-based trainings, which I think scenario-based trainings are really effective because it gives people the opportunity to be hands-on while they learn the material being provided. This just goes over, I'm not going to spend too much time, but those are the topics that we have for this coming school year. Each training is 15 minutes, and it does count, they all count as a quarter credit for professional standards. You see our food safety superheroes there in that picture. Recipe process and instruction. So that's our production manager, Tom, and he does a lot with, when we have ideas for new recipes, we give him the idea for what we're thinking, and then he goes ahead and he tests the recipes, tests the various cooling methods, making sure that the recipe, execution of the recipe before it's written is methodical in the kitchen, and then it also cools properly, so he'll test the cooling and he'll write the cooling procedures to ensure that they're cooled within the correct parameters of time. All of our recipes include critical control points and corrective actions, and as well, they also include instructions for cleaning services. Again, cannot reiterate enough the importance of hand washing and temperature requirements for each recipe. So he works with our nutrition specialist with designing and writing our recipes. Again, I'm not going to elaborate too much, but there's just a snapshot of one of our recipes, and just talks about the prepping, cooking, serving, holding, cooling, reheating. So each recipe is broken down into those 5 steps to make sure it is all those steps are tested before they're written. So we make sure that we provide all those recipes and steps to all the staff in the kitchens as they're preparing the recipes. They're making sure that they're following all of those steps. Transporting. We do have base kitchens, so kitchens that prepare larger quantities of more complex recipes, break them down into smaller quantities, and they send out to our satellite kitchens. So we have critical control points for all of our base kitchen items. They do have the critical control point for transporting, receiving, reheating. So all of those, whenever an item is considered a base item, not only does the recipe give detailed instructions for the base kitchen on how to transport that item safely, but it also gives detailed instructions for when that item is received at the satellite kitchen, what they need to do to temp the items, how to bring it down safely for cooling, and then also if they receive it cold and they need to reheat it, how they properly go about reheating that item. Equipped for food safety. That's a little eggplant. What equipment do we have to track the safety of the food we serve in red clay? Blast chillers. We do not have blast chillers in every one of our kitchens. However, we do have blast chillers in our larger kitchens where we're producing larger volumes, as well as our base kitchens. They cool foods rapidly to get the food out of the temperature danger zone quickly. They also preserve the quality of foods a lot better as far as getting them cooled quickly. But no blast chiller, no problem. Other methods of cooling are also included in our recipes, so whether or not you use ice paddles or ice baths. Transferring cooling leftovers to smaller containers. We always emphasize, please do not cool in larger depth containers. You want to transfer them to more the 2-inch steam pans rather than the larger ones. And as I mentioned earlier, we constantly are testing our cooling methods before adding them to a recipe. So while the staff may not be able to stay the full day, after full 4 hours, 6 hours to make sure that it cools properly, we will make sure we detail the parameters on how they cool properly, and we test it multiple times to ensure if they follow those steps, it's been proven that the recipe, the ingredients will cool down within the parameters that they need to. Online temperature management system. We have a cloud-based storage around-the-clock temperature logging system. It's designed to monitor coolers, freezers, and it tracks the flow of food. So it's a handheld for our monitoring of our food, and then the temperatures are monitored for our freezers and refrigerators regularly, and it's all cloud-based so that they communicate the temperatures online and we can track them. So I'm just going to elaborate on them a little bit. The handheld temperature monitoring device, it's a device that our staff uses instead of using the traditional handheld monitors. These are all electronic. They take the temperatures of all their foods throughout prepping, serving, cooling, and it automatically sends the temperature to the through the Wi-Fi, through the system, so they can be monitored 24/7 from any computer. And it gives our management the chance to really monitor and make sure that enough temperatures are being taken. That way, in the event of a foodborne illness, we could actually review our temperatures online at anywhere, from any computer. And also, it gives us the opportunity to make sure, again, that enough temperatures are being taken. So it's easy as 1, 2, 3. Select the menu item to be temped, temp the item, and if the item is out of temperature, it will notify you to take corrective action. So it won't just let you pass over it. Take temperatures often. Ensures, by having the handheld device, it does ensure foods are received, prepped, cooked, and held and cooled properly, tracks the flow of food. Taking temperatures often is important to ensure corrective actions are taken when the foods are in the danger zone. And the field operation managers that oversee several sites, they do random temperature audits. So they'll select one day a week at random, and they'll look at the number of temperatures taken for receiving, prepping, cooking, cooling, and serving. They ensure a variety of items are temped, and additional staff training is implemented if necessary. So that ongoing auditing is really important to make sure that you're compliant. Tracking the flow of food. Temperatures really should tell a story about if the food was handled properly. So you should be able to tell when you're looking at the temperatures that the staff are taking, you really should be able to tell a story on how the food was cooked, how it was served, how it was cooled, and you really should be able to kind of almost tell the story of the temperatures by looking at, if temperatures are taken properly, you really should be able to see that. It can be used in the event of a suspected foodborne illness. Someone mentioned earlier about if you didn't have those temperatures on those days, it'd be hard to prove that you were handling properly without those temperatures documented. And you can also use that story of tracking the flow of food. You can use that story to determine if additional training is needed for your staff. equipment temperature monitoring system of our units. We have these on our walk-in refrigerators and freezers. As you can see, there's a graph right there that just shows you an incident where a freezer had spiked, and we're able to look at these when we're home, if need be. Unfortunately, sometimes on a holiday it always seems to happen. But we're able to look at if a freezer is running high, we can see what's going on with the unit, and we can take corrective action to see, do we have time to go send someone over there, transfer food, or should we send someone out to correct the issue, repairman? So it gives us an opportunity to not only react to high temperatures, but it also gives us an opportunity to be proactive. We tell our managers to monitor the graphs and the temperature flows of these units. And if they see something irregular, if they see their unit is spiking more often or it's running high, it can give us the opportunity to be proactive and get someone out to look at the unit prior to the unit actually going down. So this tool has been extremely useful in catching units when they go down and actually saving a lot of the food that would have, in other case, had been thrown away if we weren't made aware. This is regular audits. These are conducted by the third-party auditor, and this just quickly shows you what they look at. They look at every month. They'll put together the site audits, and then an annual report is what you see here. It'll snapshot the number of non-compliant issues at various schools, and from a perspective of the management, it gives us the ability to assess where training needs are needed throughout the district, but then also in individual schools. So we may look at the number of non-compliant issues. If it was hand washing, we know we need to implement more hand washing training in our schools next year. So it gives us an opportunity to really see where the learning curves are throughout the various buildings. Take home moment. As I mentioned earlier, it's really important to create a diverse HACCP team. I think that's really important for practicality in the kitchens, and utilize new technology and equipment to strengthen HACCP compliance and implement new procedures within your HACCP plan. Monitor HACCP compliance through regular audits, whether or not those audits are done by a third-party auditor, or if you develop your own internal audit that your management team does. I think it's really important to not only wait for the Board of Health, but also monitor your staff's compliance with their HACCP oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, HACCP manual regularly. And regularly train staff and stress importance of compliance. You can never train staff enough on HACCP. Develop troubleshooting exercises for employees to assess in groups using real-life scenarios. Always review your HACCP manual at least annually. And most importantly, always keep school nutrition fun. It's what we're all about in our field, and if everyone learns better when they're in a fun environment. And lastly, if you have any questions, I'll take those now. It looks like we are running a little short on time, but now that you have met Red Clay Cafe, don't forget to follow us. Our handle is @RedClayCafe. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So now I actually don't see any questions coming in. If anyone has any questions, I can take them. One question, have you found the online temperature monitoring of your freezers and refrigerators to be helpful? I'll answer one question and then we'll probably call it quits because it is after 4 o'clock. Yes, the online monitoring of the refrigerators and freezers has proven to be extremely beneficial to our department. It gives us the opportunity, like I said earlier, to really quickly address when a unit is going down, and it gives us the opportunity to see how the temperatures were fluctuating on that unit to determine if we can save the food, if we need to take corrective action and move the food to an alternative site, and it gives us a chance to see how long that food was in the temperature danger zone to determine if we're going to be able to recoup any of that food. So at this time, I'm going to hand it back over to Teresa to close the presentation, and I thank you guys all very much. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you, Jessica. And we do see that there are a lot of questions. And what ISAN will do is we will look at the questions. We will either try to answer them to you individually if we can, or we will post them on our website. As mentioned earlier, we have some wonderful resources. They are on our ICN.org food safety website. We have a landing page just for that. Please feel free to do that and look at it. We have posters, we have face-to-face training, we have short lessons that you can teach in about 15 or 20 minutes. We also have several information in Spanish. So again, thank you all for today and joining us. We appreciate your questions and we appreciate your time, and have a great school year.